special. It's going like hotcakes. It's called nationality.
Welcome to Moorish News. I am your host, M.D. Lavelle, and this is Moorish News. And I want to thank all of you out there for viewing Moorish News today. You could be doing anything, but you're tuned in to us. Thank you and welcome. We're going to be covering quite a few subjects. I'm going to be introducing my guests. Today in the studio with me, I have the Grand Sheik of the Moorish Science Temple of America as a body politic. And also, I have Brother George Blakemore, a concerned citizen. So, you see, we're going to be covering just about every subject. I want to go over a few of the things that we're going to be covering today. And because we are talking about Moorish sovereignty versus sovereign citizens. So in that, part two, because the subject is such a vast subject, we need to cover it on many levels. And we are also talking about what is Moorish sovereignty and how does it relate to the present Moroccan Empire. Facing the various aspects of genocide, we're going to also talk about that and the theft of birthrights, which is something that we all need to bring our attention to right now, because what's going on right now is as a result of your birthrights being stolen, there's something else that goes along with that birthright, which is your inheritance, and that is being stolen. So how are you today, Sheikh Lavelle, Islam?
I'm peaceful, beloved. All praise is due to Allah, the Lord, Governor, Chair, Sustainer of the world. I'd like to give hail, high honors to all true and divine prophets, including Prophet Noble Drew Ali and the forerunner Marcus Garvey. Thank you for having me on the platform. Islam.
You're kindly welcome. And Brother Blakemore, how are you today?
I'm blessed to be in the presence of you powerful people, and I'm blessed that you are giving me an opportunity to come on your show and to speak to the Moorish people, my people. So thank you and thank you again. And I'm sure that this discussion is going to be informative and enlightening.
Very
and
much
God
so.
Bless you for
very
both
much
of you
so.
for inviting me here.
Yes, sir. I do pray it does as well. And let me give thanks to my team, because without teamwork, none of this could possibly be. Brother Voss and Brother Carl, of course. Now, I'm going to have to see myself in this. Forgive me, I'm not vain, but I am going to have to see myself in my screen so I can move forward. Because what I want to do is, I want to continue and talk about these various forms of genocide that we're dealing with, which is deliberate. First of all, I want to talk about the definition of genocide. That's what I want to talk about. Genocide, it's a noun.
Are we supposed to be going to the more sovereignty first?
Oh, definitely. That genocide is the deliberate and systematic destruction of a racial, political, religious, or cultural group. So, in talking about what is Moorish sovereignty, you need to keep in mind the genocide that's being practiced here in North America. Now, thank you very much, Voss. Sovereignty is also a noun. Let's talk about the definition of sovereignty. Sovereignty is the supreme power or authority of a state, or it's the supreme power or authority to govern, of a state to govern itself or another state, okay? It's a self-governing state, similar to that of autonomy in a way, because all autonomy is providing for your own self, a state governing itself. And we're going to be talking about the breakdown of the Moorish Science Temple of America as a constitutional theocratic monarchy. Also, because there are two kinds of state. We talked about the Republican and its, or principalities, and also we have that theocratic monarchy. The Grand Sheik is going to be going into that. we're going to talk about autonomy. I just spoke about that, autonomy. And the autonomy, which is the right or condition of self-government. And that's something we have as a body politic, autonomy. Moving along, we're definitely going to get into, I mentioned the theft of birthrights, because in the birthrights being stolen, we're also talking about the fact that we have no access to finances, which is another form of genocide. Now, I want to talk about, in the many faces of genocide we're going to discuss today, I want to share the fact that some people think that, or some people will debate that this is not genocide, what we're about to say today here in the studio. And we all have opinions that we're entitled to, but we're going to display the facts of the matter. And the facts will show that the argument that these people have will not add up, because we're going to attach the law to what it is we're talking about, and you will see that when you are in life and you have a position to fulfill, and if you do not fulfill that position that you are obligated to fulfill in life, let's just take a movie. You're playing a role in a movie, you know. In life, we all have a position. We have a position to take care of ourselves, and then we also have that duty to humanity. In other words, when you look in that mirror, you have to ask yourself at one time, what am I sent here to do? What is my job on this planet? Because we all have jobs, and if you fail to do your job, or if you walk away from your job and leave your job undone, in the animal kingdom, someone will replace you, or your job will be, someone will get rid of you, and someone else will step up to do your job. In the world of humans, if your job is not performed, then you will lose that position. The universe, nature, will remove you. When the plants grow and they don't produce the food, then they're pulled up from the root. So you must, stay on that job. And in the animal kingdom, just take for instance, let's say that the lion decides he don't want to do his job. He said, look, I'm tired of, holding down the pride and making sure that everything is okay in my space. I decide that it's become too overtaxing. What do you think is going to occur to the pride? And the lioness, for that matter. So you see, we have a very serious situation in dealing with genocide, because genocide is meant to wipe out, to extinguish a nation of people, similar to Rwanda, how that whole nation was just supposedly wiped out. In fact, they made a movie about it. And so, as I talk about the different forms of genocide, let's talk about a few different forms of genocide we're faced with here in America today. Because right now, in real time, the Moors here in America are facing genocide. The so-called blacks that refer to themselves as blacks, they're facing genocide. Well, what kind of genocide? Well, genocide has various faces. You have that literary genocide that's being practiced in and out of the courts.
Islam.
They won't even call us by a name, Islam. The different forms of genocide we're going to be practicing is the mental genocide. We're going to be discussing the different forms of genocide. Not practicing, we're going to be discussing mental genocide, literary genocide, the genocide that's practiced on the legal level, legal genocide, also the social genocide that's being practiced. And the worst of all genocides that is being practiced right here in North America is the theft of the birthright genocide. So with that being said, I'm going to open up my show to the Grand Sheik Loville, and he's going to talk about what is Moorish sovereignty. Grand Sheik, welcome to the show, Moorish News. It's a pleasure to have you on. Can we start off by talking about, Grand Sheik, what is Moorish sovereignty, and the sovereignty being the supreme power of the land? Could we give a breakdown on the theft of the birthrights, of the so-called Negro, black, and colors, and what that means in a form of genocide for us today, real time? Thank you.
Islam.
Islam.
So I first rise saying again, I rise giving praise to Allah, the Most High. want to explain to the people that sovereignty is of the utmost importance when it comes to nationhood and autonomy. So don't ever let anyone tell you that Moorish Americans are not sovereign in a collective sense, in the way that every other nation is sovereign, because that is a trick and they're attempting to hoodwink you. So what we want to do is we want to go into some of the subject matter. That there is a story in the book of Sun Tzu, and I believe that was Ho Lu. This is King Ho Lu, and he invited Sun Tzu because he heard of he was famed as a instructor or as a commander. Okay, so in order to test his skill, he asked Sun Tzu for a test, and Sun Tzu said, well, there was a group of women, okay? The king had a group of women, and so Sun Tzu went and he actually had these women converted to an army, okay, the way it went. He took the two head women that the king loved, and he appointed them at the head. There were 180 of the women, and he separated them in parties of 90. So he elected two of the head women for king, and he gave them orders. He gave them instructions, and they heard the instructions, and then he began to shout orders to the women. Right flank, left. So they began to laugh. So he said, if the orders are not clear, then the fault is of the commander or the general. So then he gave the orders again. Left, right, 1, 2. Again, the ladies began to laugh. Okay? So then he says, now if the instructions are clear and the commanding officers don't understand the instructions, then the fault is not on the commander, but it's on the officers. So what he did was he had the executioner on site, by the way, and he ordered that both of those women had their heads taken off or had them beheaded. Now this is pretty cruel, but it was to show the other women who was boss. So the king sent his servant down and to ask Sun Tzu to not execute the two women, because his food wouldn't be that much sweeter, because if he's seen them get their lives taken away. So Sun Tzu sent the message back to his messenger to tell him that the king is only deals with where he really want a commander. He's playing around, in so many words. So make a long story short, the women's lives were cut short, and the next two stepped up, and when he gave the orders, they followed the orders to the letter. When he said left, they went left. When he said right, right. He sent the orders back that the troops were ready to go through fire and water at the command of their prince, the sovereign. Of course, the king, he didn't want to take it that far, but the point is the instructions have to be clear, and we have been given instructions, divine instructions by the Holy Prophet. And I want to go into those instructions because those instructions deals with the sovereignty that we have as a nation of people, sovereignty.
Islam.
This is the divine instructions from the Holy Prophet, Magistrate and Subject. Chapter 29. O thou, the favorite of heaven, whom the sons of men, thy equals, have agreed to raise to sovereign power and set as a ruler over themselves, consider the ends and importance of their trust, far more than the dignity and height of thy station. Now, you didn't hear the prophet say your president. You didn't hear the prophet say your mayor. All right? Thou art clothed in purple and seated on the throne. The crown of majesty invested thy temples. The scepter of power is placed in thy hands, but not for thyself were these ensigns given. not meant for thine own, but the good of thy kingdom. The glory of a king is the welfare of his people. His power and dominion rest on the hearts of his subjects. The mind of a great prince is exalted with the grandeur of his situation. He evolveth high things and searcheth for business worthy of his power. He called together the wise men of his kingdom. He consulteth among them with freedom, and heareth the opinions of them all. He looketh among his people with discernment. He discovereth the abilities of men, and employeth them according to their merit. His magistrates are just, his ministers are wise, and the favorite of his bosom deceiveth him not.
Can I ask you a question, Grand Sheik?
Islam,
with that
Sheikh.
pause. A lot of the viewers may want to know what makes the Magistrate and Subject, chapter 29, valid. Those instructions that have been given. Well, what makes them valid? That they should be followed and that they should be even acknowledged in this day and time.
Islam. What we are seeing here is the fact that by us being a part of a religious corporation or religious organization, this is basically our book of statutes. The divine instructions from the Holy Prophet is, this is the religious authority, not the great Quran of Muhammad, which is listed in our authority, but this is the religious literature of our society. And so these are the statutes that we frame our society in accordance with. So the importance is that this is part of the Muslim law. And I'm going to get into some of that as far as how the sovereignty is operating and how the Prophet Noble Drew Ali set us up.
So this is sealed and lawful at the same time.
Correct.
Okay, can we talk about the breakdown of the Moorish Science Temple of America as a constitutional theocratic monarchy?
Exactly, and that's what's leading me to this note. I want to read from Niccolo Machiavelli, the Prince, and this explains the type of governments. Okay, and I quote, "There are only two kinds of states, republics or principalities. Principalities are either hereditary, where the family in control has been long established, or they are new. Such states are thus acquired and are either accustomed to live under a prince or to live in freedom. They are acquired either by military power, the military power of the prince himself or of others, or else by fortune or ability." So what we have is a hereditary estate. It's a principality, okay? You also have republic forms of government. The United States of America, when it was initially a usufruct and then the recognition was given, was a republic. But you have to understand the principality was already here. Hence the permission and the recognition that was given from the Moors or the present Moroccan Empire that was present here on these shores. So it's valid because the laws that were here when they came over here and so-called discovered is still valid. So I want to kind of read something else that speaks towards the sovereignty that's been established. The Prophet Noble Drew Ali created the first Moorish Islamic state in 1927 after the political independence and statehood recognition of our nation city-state. Okay. The Holy Prophet Noble Drew Ali asserted effective occupation of the territory when he hoisted the Moorish flag and took possession of the territory and established a Moorish administration to govern the Moorish sovereignty over the land in 1928 AD by season of absolute deed as freeholder in due course and by the establishment of a Moorish Islamic chartered divine constitutional monarchy, which proves effective occupation of a Moorish Islamic state republic form of government. State territory sovereignty of the possession extend also over all neighboring territories as far as is necessary for the Moorish integrity, security, and defense of the land actually occupied, and he was not under any United States of America protectorate, and he did not withdraw from it or has been successfully driven away by the native Indians or European colonists without attempting or being able to reoccupy it. The Holy Prophet Noble Drew Ali plenary power and authority as spiritual tenderer, which assumes Moorish Islamic religious sovereignty over the religious occupied territory, The Moorish Islamic State in particular maintained a certain religious order among the native tribes so as to restrain them from acts of violence against the neighboring territories and punish them for acts if committed through the Moorish Sovereign Acts of the Moorish Koran, chapter 29, etc. The Islamic State Republic of the Moorish Science Temple of America was founded in 1913 AD and celebrated its 100-year birthday, July 20th, 2013, as a sovereign autonomous nation, independence and statehood recognition in the same land area when it first declared itself a nation through its Moorish Declaration of Independence in 1927 AD from the United States in a formal within the Holy Koran, that we are returning the church and Christianity back to the European nations, while we, the Moorish Americans, are returning to Islam, which was founded by our forefathers for our earthly and divine salvation, the covenant of the great God Allah. Honor thy father and thy mother, that their days may be longer on the earth land, which the Lord thy God, Allah, hath given thee. Even in the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America on July 4th, 1776, declaring their independence from Great Britain, it said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. The Moorish Americans' creators endowed them with the same unalienable and prescriptible human rights. Islam?
Islam. Now, that's theocratic and republican forms of government you just went into. Can we talk about that autonomy now? Because that's one of the things I've found to scare people, autonomy. Because when you talk about a condition of self-government or the right or condition of self-government, people fear that something radical is going to be going place. People fear that the government is almost like the pimp and whore relationship, the pimp being the government, the whore being the people. And a lot of people feel that they cannot exist without the government that is being, and you know what the pimp expects from a whore.
Well, this is just like our people. Our people have been in a situation where they're like, it's a domestic violence. They're the abused spouse. And they keep going back to the spouse that keeps beating on them and keeps mistreating them. And many times when people look at domestic violence situation, they can't understand, well, how is it that this person keeps going back and they're getting beat down all the time? Well, there's a psychological thing that's going on where our people believe that they've been deriving a benefit. They believe, they don't understand that genocide has been committed against them. So that's why I kind of want to read, and I want to continue going into Magistrate and Subject, because see, we have to understand, well, what is a good relationship? What is a good situation that we can find ourselves in? Just like that woman, what would she would have to understand, well, what is a good man? Has she ever been in a good relationship before, so that she can be able to compare and relate that relationship to something else?
Okay, well, the citizens, being that woman or that the males, if the citizens have never had or they don't have a memory of being treated respectfully by the government, then what do they have to hold it up against?
Well, that's part of the reason why the Prophet Noble Drali was sent to us and divinely prepared to bring us what we needed. And this is why we need to have divine instructions, which I want to continue in part now. Now, this is describing the king, okay? This is a contradiction to the pimp that our people have been so used to.
Which is the government.
That's right, the government that has been relegating you to the status of chattel property. You're out lost at sea instead of being able to firmly put yourself on a seat, on a solid rock of salvation, like you see the prophet stepping on a solid rock of salvation on our questionnaire. So this is the king, and this is the prince, and this is what he does for his people.
And this is like the
he
sovereign.
Smileth. This is the sovereign. Okay. He smileth on the arts, and they flourish. The sciences improve beneath the culture of his hand. With the learned and ingenious he delighteth himself. He kindleth in their breasts emulation, and the glory of his kingdom is exalted by their labors. Now, I wonder why there are Moorish Americans out there telling you that Moorish Americans are not supposed to be sovereign, and you here have a whole chapter that deals with sovereignty and the fact that you're supposed to have a head of state that recognizes you and that represents your interests before the nations of the earth.
A form of genocide.
The spirit of the merchant who extendeth his commerce, the skill of the farmer who enricheth his lands, the the ingenuity of the artist, the improvements of the scholar. All of these he honoreth with his favor, or rewardeth with his bounty. See, it's not enough for your Grand Sheik or your assistant Grand Sheik or the officials of your temple to have a full-time job working in corporate America and they're doing part-time work for you as a nation. That's not really what it's about. And see, it's a cop-out for people who have fezes on their heads and ills and bades on their name to attempt to tell you that you have no connection to sovereignty. When you're reading it right here in the prophet's lessons,
That's
it
right.
is a crying shame that you have certain individuals out there that will tell you that being sovereign and being autonomous is not more science. It's a crying shame.
That's
so
genocide.
if
That's
you
the
allow
point.
yourself to be misled, tricked, and hoodwinked and bamboozled, then you deserve whatever's been given to you. Because you're going to get what you invest in. You're going to get, as they say, what you pay for. So let's get back to the sovereign. He planteth new colonies. He buildeth strong ships. He openeth rivers for convenience. He formeth labors for safety. His people abound in riches, and the strength of his kingdom increaseth. See, that is opposite to the genocide. That's what you're not getting when you're involved with genocide. You have people come into your communities, moving all of your bit. You don't have no jobs for yourself. You're not able to sustain yourself. You have people coming, running for office and telling you, hey, what do you have to lose? Because you have nothing. You're not used to anything. You have, the per capita household income of what? Under $10,000? That's a crying shame. Your life is like you're a lab rat experiment.
And
You're
this is
trained to live under meager portions.
But you also have people that are trained to live on a much larger portion at the same time. So this is all a form of genocide. And this is what I want to get the viewing audience to see, because some of us don't realize that genocide is being practiced on us daily in our lives here in North America. We don't even have a clue that genocide is being practiced.
Okay,
and I'm going to finish up because I want to bring in Brother Blakemore,
Islam.
because this genocide needs to cease. But first, we need to identify it. Continue, please.
Islam. And it also says, he frameth his statutes with equity and wisdom. His subjects enjoy the fruits of their labor in security, and their happiness consists of the observance of the law. This is our book of statutes. He founded his judgments on the principle of mercy, but in the punishment of offenders, he is strict and impartial. His ears are open to the complaints of his subjects. He restraineth the hands of their oppressors, and he delivereth them from their tyranny. I guess this is why they want to act like this chapter doesn't exist, because it explains to you everything that head leadership or our ruler is supposed to do, whether you refer to him as Grand Sheik, whether you refer to him as Sultan, or whatever name is given to our leadership or head. These are the things that's supposed to be done, and this is what hasn't been done.
And that's being autonomous. Is
Islam,
that correct?
this is part of being autonomous, because it says it consists of the observance of the law. Part of being autonomous is being able, having the freedom to create your own law.
That's it.
This is in conjunction with Act 1, where it says the Grand Sheik and chairman of the Moorish Science Temple of America is empowered to make and enforce laws.
With the assistance.
So the only way you're going to be able to make laws is if you're autonomous, which brings you back to the sovereignty piece.
So you cannot be without it. Let's talk about the death of the birthrights, Grand Sheik, because that's connected to that genocide as a result of the birthright of the so-called Negro, Black, African American being stolen. It's actually set you up
for
a genocide.
There had to be a condition where you either naturalized or you expatriated to a government that has a treaty with the empire. So this is what occurs. By default, everyone that's under these shores were Moorish.
Are you going to the history of the land ownership?
Yes, as a matter of
great.
fact, that takes us right
the
into the
USA.
history the history of the ownership, because see, what you have is when these four shores were first discovered, okay, quote unquote discovered, you had a system of land ownership. Well, there was no land ownership per se. You didn't have a situation where you had deeds being exchanged from one party to another. It was just out in open history. I mean, out in open land, and we were using the land as needed for agricultural purposes, and there was no hoarding of land or sectoring off or surveying of the land. So when we go back originally, the original transfer was implemented through the pharaohs, okay?
That master
Egypt.
title,
so,
okay.
Yeah, but we want to go back. I want to read that briefly in chapter 47 because
Thank
see,
you.
what we want to do is we want to make sure you understand that the only permission for any transfer of land was this. Beyond that, no permission was ever given for any other transfers.
No
for
land
any
grants,
banks or
no
for
surveys,
any other
no
nation to
plaques,
come over
no
here
patents.
to have the authority. The treaties gave
Okay.
or was able to confer any land over, because when you go into the Constitution, you have inalienable rights. These are rights that are non-transferable.
So that's
So
to
we
this
can't
day,
give 'em up.
right?
Right,
That's
even
up
to
until
this
this
day.
day. No rights have been given.
Even up until this day.
Up-
So
this is it.
This is chapter 47, Egypt, the capital empire of the domain of Africa, and I'm reading from verse 6. And it reads, the Moabites from the land of Moab who received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle and inhabit northwest Africa. They were the founders and are the true possessors of the present Moroccan empire, with their Canaanite, Hittite, and Amorite brethren who sojourned from the land of Canaan seeking new homes. So we see that's where the permission was originally given. Now, when we fast forward up to the time where the government came over here, those were what's known as, those were surveys, land patents, and master land patents, I believe, right?
That's
What's it
right.
called?
Master title
Master
plats.
title plats.
Right, surveys
So
and land
this
patents.
is where
That's
the
it.
first titles were issued from. But what you need to understand is that there was no
Authority.
authorization
Right.
conferred to the government to begin to issue parcels of land.
It wasn't
There
granted.
was no law, exactly.
Well, let
The
me ask you a
treaty
question,
or the
Grand Sheik.
Constitution never conferred any right,
Any permission.
for the land to be transferred over to
So
anybody.
if the land was to be transferred over to someone, that would have to be, once again, the instructions given, the permission that is given from the great pharaohs. Is that right?
That's correct. Let me read a little note for something so I can give the
Because I want you to go into the change of titles
from
and
the
the
book.
abstract of titles
Okay,
after that.
and I think this is going to kind of address that a little bit. This is
Okay.
from the book Golden Jubilee Edition, B.R. Verma, Islamic Law, Personal Being, Commentaries on Muhammadan Law in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, 1986 Law Publishers. 1. Conception of property in English law. In order to appreciate the questions of conditions in gifts and also in bequests, necessary to first note the different conceptions of property are classified by a division on the basis of immovable and movable, real and personal property rights in land described as estate in land. Do not always imply only absolute ownership, but also rights which fall short of it and are limited to the life of the grantee or otherwise limited in respect of time and duration or use. Property in all these various forms are described as estate. Ownership of land is thus split up into estates distinguished in points of quality, example, into legal and equitable estates, and in point duration, example, estates in fee simple, absolute, entail for life, or in remainder. 2. Conception of property in Muhammadan law, general. Muslim law draws no distinction between real and personal property, and there is no authoritative work on Muslim law which affirms that Muslim law recognizes the splitting up of ownership of lands into estates. What Muslim law does recognize and insist upon is the distinction between the corpus of the property itself, ayin, and the usufruct in the property, manafi. Over the corpus of the property, the law recognizes only absolute dominion, heritable and unrestricted in point of time. And where a gift of the corpus seeks to impose a condition is rejected as repugnant. But interest limited in point of time can be created in the usufruct of the property, and the dominion of the corpus takes effect subject to any such limited incidence of estate under the English law, Under the Muhammadan law, they are only usufructory interests and
Let me
not
ask the question, Grand
rights of
Sheikh.
ownership and of any kind of possession how delivered. A, where the property is in possession of some other person. B, where the natives of the property do not admit of physical delivery. C, where the donee is already in possession. Islam.
Okay, well, let me say this, Grand Sheikh, for the record. Are we in usufruct position right now with this land not being acknowledged here in North America? Because we understand if you don't recognize the land, it's called sheets, but is that the position right now?
Well,
and I know
the
this is we're going to have to definitely go into a part 3 because it has to be understood that we're sovereign to this land, the sovereignty, and we have to make sure that the nations of the earth get it right and not get us twisted with the sovereign citizens, which is not the track that we're on. But I want to move a little further on and talk about the change of title, the abstract of title, the mortgages, and the land taxes, and that's going to take a lot. And with us looking at less than a half hour, we want to get to these different forms of genocide because
I just want
what's being practiced.
To segue into that, we just want to make sure the people understand that the mortgages and all of that, that ties into the genocide piece because they actually are using that. That's been used against our state. You have foreigners coming over here and operating through our state, using mortgages, using chain of titles, but without permission. So this creates a situation where we become disenfranchised. Getting back to the point you made about the usufruct. The usufruct is basically an operation for them to utilize the real estate without having to pay us rent. So they had the use of the property for a certain period of time. But yeah, we can go right into that genocide piece because that takes us right in segues right into the genocide piece with regards to the economic blockages that we're facing, not having access to our estates and our birthrights. See, being cut off from our birthrights is the ultimate. It is the ultimate form of genocide because you have all this wealth, you have all this connection to the land, and yet due to the fact that most of our people have not waken up, we're still being cut off from having access to what's actually ours.
So does that tie into the Motu Propria? Because the criminal acts that's being formed here in North America today, something has to be done. And because the United States of America, the U.S.A. is in fact a corporation, means that they do have to answer to someone at some time. And that document, I believe, set notice 1st of September 2014. Let's talk about the various faces of genocide, because genocide today in North America has a face on so many different levels. We want to get past the part where we have to basically bring our people in the ambulance in a crippled state of thinking, which is back to that They Live movie I talked to in the last video, having to give our people this knowledge and bring them to a critical state because they are praying for the very knowledge that they receive, and yet it's far too great for them to accept it. So because of the birthright theft, the denial, the constant denial to access of our land and estate puts us in a homeless position here in North America. Not only that, but our economics, our people make nations and countries million and billionaires, and yet we are sitting here on our own land and we're poor. It's just like the Africans, how they're in fact being genocide is being practiced on our brothers and sisters in different parts of the world, and jewels and diamonds are being drawn out. They call them blood diamonds, some people, and yet the people are poor. No water, no clean water to drink, no food to eat. Where do we go? So with this, let's talk about economic genocide, and I want you to briefly go in on that, and then Mr. Blakemore, I want you to, because genocide it's beyond racist, you understand? It used to be, well, if you were a Moor, you would be respected, but now the so-called blacks are also being respected. Our people are being attacked viciously. disrespected. We are being disrespected.
Disrespect.
I wish it was respect. I pray for respect for all peoples of the nation. So I want to go briefly, I want you to go into the genocide on an economic level that's being practiced, not only with the prices, with the food industry, how
two of the biggest things is the prison-industrial complex and the war on drugs. Well, beginning with the war on drugs, it is part of what fueled the prison-industrial complex. So we saw a situation like when crack hit the community, it hit the community hard. There was no compassion for our people. You know, they was like lock them up and throw away the key.
So they put them in jails.
Exactly, were locked up,
Right.
families were split up, and nonviolent offenders were locked up with football
And some of these
years.
people, may I say, are still in jail to this day.
That's
I
correct.
want you to expound on that, Brother Blakemore, because the opium, the opioid situation we're faced with now.
Yes.
And let's go across the board with
Okay.
that genocide that occurred with us, and now with this situation.
Well, that's true with rock cocaine, when it was devastating to the Moorish people enslaved in America, so-called free blacks throughout the nation on these concentration camps, urban cities, and reservations from Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, New York, Houston, Texas, throughout wherever Moorish people was, they brought in, the white European brought in rock cocaine. And it devastated, it broke up the Moorish families. At that time, they was beginning to grow, come into awareness, opening up business. But when that came, all the progress that was made, all the progress that had been made was almost wiped out. And now they got something here that they're saying opium, opiate or something. Anyway, these European children now are dying. I was able to go to a committee meeting when they had the Chicago Police Department, they had the Health Department, and the Fire Department in this committee. And they was talking about how they was going to help Rebecca, Jock, and Mary Beth, those European children that are dying throughout the United States, all in the Appalachian Mountains, taking those drugs. That's open. But they said it is no longer, that's what egregious act that they pull is no longer a criminal act, but is now a safety or a health issue.
Oh, wow.
And they say even Reverend Trump, President Trump had a special hour to speak to the nation about this problem, saying that we got to help these white European people. We got to help our people. Well, who helped the Moorish people? Who helped our people when they Pookie, Kiki, and Shanita was on rock cocaine?
Yeah, that's so
and then
true. The industrial
complex
prison
and
industrial
three
complex.
strikes, you was out in California.
right.
If you was on the West Coast, three strikes.
Three-strike rule.
Three
Okay.
strikes. So now,
Crenshaw was hurt.
the Moorish people here, you got to see inequality, the European inequality.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. So
because
here's
they're
what we need
treating
to
their
do.
own, the Europeans are treating
Yes,
their
they
people
are.
one way and treating the Moorish nation here
Another way.
in America another way. And so-called black leadership, so-called black, the gentleman over here, spoke eloquent about the responsibility of a leadership and a sovereign people.
Yes.
You
the
must
grand
take
chief.
care of your people. The Quran, you have rules and regulations, and we must live by this. But our people have been misled in America, that mind, that's a form of genocide.
That's that mental
That is-
manipulation.
that's
another
right
form
here.
of genocide.
It's not only
Right up
shooting a
here.
man,
That's
sometimes
right.
you walking around alive, but physically, but mentally you're dead.
That's
so that
mental
genocide, they have wiped
genocide we're
out
talking
your
about.
ability to reason.
Another thing, Mr. Blakemore, I'm
wiped
so
out
glad
your
you brought
ability
up
to reason.
that mental genocide, because a lot of the TV programs that are being put on is taking up a lot of the space that we need for civics and for law. Because when you're taking in all these trash TV shows and garbage shows,
Yes.
I mean, TV can be a form of entertainment if you are governing the programs that the children and that you are watching. Because the space that's needed to get the law, the civics, the information to show you why you're sovereign and what you can do to better your condition, because all we're asking is for our people to be nationalized so they can be upright citizens. We want to bring our people out the dark into the marvelous light. The literary genocide that's being practiced in the courts. You walk into the court, your heart is set right, you want justice, but you
Yes.
have the judges that are practicing law from the bench. That's a
Yes.
form of genocide.
Genocide.
Literary.
That's
They're
right.
forcing you,
And economic.
The Blakemore piece.
yeah, the
Yes.
Blakemore
Part of it,
piece.
that's-
Yes.
Go into that piece, brother.
Well, just like
That,
they had
literary
on the,
genocide, painting it,
that
dehumanizing.
movie, that's Robin
Robin
Hood, the
Hood.
Prince of Thieves with Morgan Freeman, and there was this witch that kept referring to him as the painted man. Okay, so they were using this term Blakemore. Now, black is a noun. And no, black is an adjective, correction. Black is
yes,
an adjective. An
adjective.
adjective is something that's used to describe a noun.
Yes, describe.
More is a noun. A
Noun.
noun is a person, place,
place,
or
or
a thing.
thing. Absolutely.
So you had what you had. A Blakemore is a what you call
It's described.
a compound word, right?
Yes.
So it's two words brought together. So what you have to understand is, instead of calling you Moor, this was a mark that was put upon you, even back during the time when the Moors was in Spain. Blakemore. But then they just dropped the Moor off and just said blacks.
Yes.
So this is what they did. In science, they painted the Moors black.
Yes.
This is a mark. This is a form of disrespect. This is a form
It's
of
a form of-
disenfranchisement. And you saw
genocide.
it
It's
even
a
back
form of
then. Yes, it's a
genocide.
form of genocide.
Yes, it
because
is.
it's literary genocide. Because
Yes.
you have actually been removed from the annals of history,
Yes.
and you can't trace yourself back. You can't link yourself back because you never referred to yourself as black. There's no reference to a black people,
Yes.
and that cuts you off essentially from your illustrious history and the past that you've been associated with.
So in other words, that's a form of dehumanization.
That's genocide.
Which
Through
is
literature.
a form
Ethnic
of
cleansing.
genocide.
Genocide.
Through
Killing.
cleansing.
Ethnic cleansing through the
Ethnic-
literature.
Through the literature.
Yeah,
Let's
ethnic
talk about
cleansing.
that social genocide.
So-
Because what
that's
we
right.
have is we have so many media blocks
Yes.
in the law.
Yes.
And without the communication with the people, explaining to them and having that confidence in one another,
Yes.
having that brotherly, sisterly love,
That
we have a
union, that
problem.
love.
This
But-
is why
And let's
But-
talk about the medical experiments that's
Yes.
being practiced on the people
Yes.
daily.
Yes.
Because what we have
with
is
abortions and everything, they
right
sell those
with
parts.
abortions.
Yes.
Also, absolutely, and we also have the criminalization culture
Yes.
activities. Can you go on that briefly? Those criminalization cultural activities.
Well, yeah,
Grand
what
Chief?
they've done is they've criminalized the activities that we have engaged in since time immemorial. So that means that if it was a beaten path for you to go down this path, our ancestors have did this so much that it's a walk path through, but now the corporation comes in and they say it's illegal for you to walk down that path. Well, now they have criminalized custom.
Yes.
That has been, that we've engaged in since
Now-
time immemorial.
Okay, Mr. Blakemore, Brother Blakemore, I want to talk about this scientific genocide that's
Okay,
going on
all
because
right.
the food, we're
Yeah.
being killed so bad with this food, it's just really crazy.
Monster,
It's almost like we're like a lab rat.
Yeah,
You understand?
yeah.
Everybody on the planet is a lab rat. And
Yeah.
they know what occurs when you take food from
Yeah,
the rats. They
yeah.
begin to fight each other. So
Yeah.
you're going to have, if you live in a Moorish neighborhood, Moorish crime. If you live in a Spanish, Mexican neighborhood, Mexican crime.
Yeah.
If you live in an Irish neighborhood, Irish crime. If you live in a Jamaican neighborhood, Jamaica crime.
Yeah.
Because you're living around your people. But
Yeah.
when there's scarcity, these crimes exist. And also that nationalistic genocide. I want to go into briefly
But,
because
educational too.
definitely educational. That's
genocide.
connected to that nationalistic, because that's a lack of reference of anything positive about the Moors,
Yes.
or even the blacks.
You
Yes.
hear no mention about the Moorish Americans in the media. You hear no mention about our history. You don't hear anything about the Prophet Noble Ali. He should have a holiday. I mean, he's a prophet to the whole world. It's like only time you hear about Moorish Americans is when there's something negative or they're trying to relate us to some sovereign citizen crap.
And that is a form of genocide, even with our people that refer to themselves as so-called blacks. When the athlete, they all started to go down on one knee, it was beyond the flag.
Yes.
Yes, it was. It was about rights, human rights for them being paid equally. I want you to go into that briefly in closing, because I want you to address Brother Blakemore in closing, your heartfelt words in the spirit of love to our audience, viewing audience. Thank you.
Well,
And why it's important to support Moorish News and Moorish News Media, please.
One thing that is a form of genocide is through the educational system. Now with so-called social media, our people are texting, emailing, tweeting, Facebook, all type of technology. But they as the Moorish people, you have to be analytical and you have to think all these gadgets here, but you can't get your way out of poverty. You can't tweet it out. You can't text it out. You can't email it out. You have to go back to a sovereign people and the laws that gentlemen govern them. You can't do it because you see them everywhere just a tweeting and just a doing this. And you get yourself out of the Holocaust that you in right here.
The Holocaust, the genocide.
The genocide that's going on with you.
Holocaust.
Treat yourself out of that.
That's it.
You got to go by the law as a sovereign people that you brought up.
That's right.
That's the key. The ancestors have already laid it out for us.
That's right.
All we have to do is follow it.
That's right,
because
Grand
it's
Sheik.
in the law.
You said it right. You couldn't have said it
It's
better.
in the
Grand
law.
Sheik in closing. You go ahead on and
Yes,
wrap it up.
now,
I love you
it's
all.
in
The
the
love that
law.
will never die. Give us the word, Grand Sheik.
We got to get back to the ways of our ancient forefathers.
That's right, our ancestors.
Hey, Allah sent us a divine prophet to show us the way. Don't be tricked and hoodwinked out of your birthright.
That's right.
You have to stand up for your sovereignty. Support the ones that supporting you.
Amen.
right.
Support Moorish Law Services.
That's
Support
right.
Moorish News Media.
Yes,
support the
support it.
Moorish News. Support
Yes.
this administration because we stand up for you.
I
Campaigning
thank
for
you
love
very
every
much,
day.
Yes,
Grand Sheik.
yes.
That was
Right.
well said. The power of the press to provide transparency to the government and power of the FOIA as a remedy is what we will be working on and working with. I am so honored to be here to give you this Moorish news. And I want you to know that the restoration of power of the people through supporting the proper administration is what's needed. Continue and love yourself, everyone. I love you with a love that will never die. And remember, Allah, the great God, the Father of this universe, love you and his son, Yahshua. Let us stick together. Let us stand together. And remember, we are one. Thank you, my guest, Sheik Grand Sheik Laville. Thank you, Brother Blakemore.
Thank you.
I appreciate you all coming. And I will continue and give my love and thank you, my people that's behind the scenes, because without you, none of this will be possible. Much love to the world. Peace.
Love,
Praise
peace.
Allah. That was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful show.
If you do nothing else, proclaim your nationality today. National quality and character, we need it today. The status of belonging to a particular nation. If you do nothing else, proclaim your nationality today. Nationality is the order of the day. If you do nothing else, proclaim your nationality today. What's your